So hi,
Okay.
thank you so much for joining. Really grateful that you were able
Hi.
to do this. I think that women in America and women in the UK really should hear from, the South American women in this fight. And I haven't had anyone that lives in Spain talking it either, so I'm very grateful that you could join me.
Spain is beautiful. And like Spanish feminism, like from Spain, is so big. So I'm grateful that I moved to Spain for 7 months just to experience Spanish feminism. It's great. Like abolitionists are very strong
The gender
here.
abolition?
No, not only gender, but prostitution.
Oh,
And
good, good.
yes, my first real march as a feminist was here on March,
Really?
yes, the 8th of March. And God, it was my first time actually feeling that I was a feminist. Yes, sure, I'm a feminist, count me in, like a radical feminist march.
It
The
was a
thing is,
rad femme march because I don't even think there's
there
enough
were
rad femmes that are like open in the US to even
okay,
do a march.
there were two marches. So the abolitionists and the radical feminists and people not necessarily radical, but who agree with those ideas versus the liberal feminists. And I call them the Happy Meal feminism
Happy
because
meal
truly,
feminism, buddy.
yeah, because they're hypocrites. Hypocrites. That is that the word in English?
Hypocrites, but I knew what you
Hypocrites.
meant.
Hipócritas, It's the same word. They talk about how, you know, women's rights and how women are killed and raped here in Spain. And then they start talking about how sex workers um need to still be there represented in feminism because what they do is great for their autonomy and women need to choose how they sell their bodies through surrogacy. They're very into surrogacy. Like liberal feminists here are very into surrogacy, and it's also like they think that I'm a lesbian, I'm a homosexual. I like to call myself a female homosexual because men now are calling themselves lesbians, and that just and I love the label. I love lesbian as a word. I think it sounds quite nice in every language I
It
speak.
is. It's a sexy language. Oh, what
Yeah,
is it in Spanish?
lesbiana. It's just an A at the
Ooh,
end.
sexy.
Yeah. However, I just can't stand lesbianos with an O. Like in Spanish, most like feminine nouns end with A and most masculine nouns end with O. It's not like English. That's something I want to talk about. And lesbianos here, like we feminists call them those men who want to be lesbians. So they don't only identify as women, they identify as lesbians.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just crazy. That march is huge. And like the
The
liberal
Live Femme
feminist
March?
march,
Okay.
huge, huge, huge. And they have like like bands, like Brazilian music, and they're like it's like a carnival. While the radical feminists, we also have a little bit of a dancing, but it's more like mostly chants, and they're very important and very radical, and it's much more serious. Like we care about our rights. We are worried. We denounce situations. We don't think it's a party. We don't see International Women's Day as a party, while like liberal feminists kind of do. That's why I call them the Happy Meal feminism.
I didn't realize that there were feminists that were super into surrogacy. That seems strange to me. Like I wasn't I only am recently against surrogacy because I was under the impression that it was more like, infertile women and I didn't really conceptualize or I didn't really understand fully that it didn't register with me that it's truly is selling a human body and selling a human being when you sell the baby. And then I joined the radfem circles spaces on like Twitter and Instagram, and I learned more about it from radfems, and that's why I have the new position that I do as it being against surrogacy. And I know, did you see what California just passed?
No, can you inform me?
Yeah, I'm gonna. I don't remember it's SB something, but I'm just going to go pull it up because might as well. So SB 721 just passed the Assembly Health Committee. It will define biological men in a gay relationship as infertile and force
No
employers and
way.
insurance companies to pay for women to be their surrogates, entitling men to raise a motherless generation. So, yeah,
I mean, like,
Handmaid's Tale.
I love Spanish culture and I love how gay friendly they are. And one of the things that I admire about this country and why I wanted to move here is because of how like people's rights are almost sacred, like even if they're homosexuals. And it was one of the first countries to approve gay marriage. And I mean, there's like, I as a woman, there's nothing stopping me from marrying another woman. There's no, I have, I can marry. There's nothing biological that's, not allowing myself to get married to a woman. It's just because that's how we organize society. Men marry women. It's all social, it's constructed. But there's a very important reason why two men cannot have a baby. It's because men can't gestate. And when you learn and internalize that men can gestate, women can. It's not like we need to gestate and all women can are able to, or it's the only way to live as a woman. Like I hate the idea of thinking that I need to have another human being inside of me in order to feel like a complete human being. I love how in this country, women who don't want to have a baby are respected. But the idea of men needing to be in somehow like rewarded or like entitled to the right of having children,
Yeah,
like if they
it's
could
an issue
gestate,
with
it's not.
entitlement.
I
I
think
think
like
we need to have,
men can
sorry.
gestate. Sorry,
No.
men can gestate. That's it. Point, period.
Yeah, I think we need to have a referendum on human rights because it's turning into entitlement. Like maybe we shouldn't have even included pursuit of happiness in the Constitution of the US because we are entitled to everything that we think will make us happy. And we're not entitled to purchase another human being. You know, our human rights begin and end with us. It doesn't involve another human being. So life, liberty, property. That's it. And
Yeah.
another human being is not property. And you read stories like there's a gay couple that is suing a surrogacy business because their surrogate ended up being, they ended up with a daughter, a girl. They're having a girl, and so
And they
they're
wanted a
suing.
boy.
They wanted a son. Yeah, they wanted a second son. They want two sons, and so they're suing because of the cost of that surrogacy, and then also because they still want a boy. They want like that also to basically be like someone else to have another baby for them so they can have
It
a
just
son
becomes
because they want two
that's so
sons.
creepy. That's
It's
so
disgusting.
creepy. It's kind of misogynist too, because they don't want to have a daughter. That's sad.
Oh yeah, like I mean, if
But
you,
why do you?
I
Yeah,
mean, so many baby girls are aborted
it's true.
because
And then
people want
yeah,
sons.
I you were talking about the infertile women, and I think that we are as women, we are in everywhere, but especially in South America, we are taught to be like have a lot of empathy and feel the pain of another person. And I think that's beautiful. I think every human, and I should feel that. And I think that little boys in South America, in South American countries, are very like they learn not to feel empathy because that makes them weak. And that makes like
Okay.
you can feel a certain amount, but not too much because that makes you weak, emasculated, and you need to be this macho, at least in the previous generations. And my dad cries so much, and he's often like made fun of because he's very empathetic and he is very sensitive, which is crazy. But we are taught to have a lot of empathy and feel the pain of the person we have in front of us. And when you see these documentaries that they show in national TV here in Spain, you see these women crying, these infertile women. Because, men can gestate, and that's not a surprise. Everyone knows that men can't. But then you have women who for some reason can't. And that obviously, seeing a woman cry because they cannot have a baby because they don't have the uterus, and the only way they can make it happen is to rent another woman. They don't say to rent another woman because that sounds horrible, but that's what it is. We just feel empathy and we don't see any problem because we see the end product, the baby and the happy woman. And we're like, oh, it's not so bad. But what happens there? Surrogacy
Yeah,
is illegal in Spain for a very good reason.
it's
Surrogacy is
illegal in Spain.
illegal in Spain and in France. And
Oh,
everyone who
that's
has a
wonderful. I
surrogate
didn't know
baby
that.
here, everyone who has a surrogate baby here who brings a child from like another country needs to go through like documents, and it's regulated, it's banned, and they go to Ukraine because that's the cheap uterus of Europe. Everyone knows that. Most
Yeah,
surrogates are in Ukraine here.
I think that's starting to change because of the war, but yeah, and now it's moving to India, from my understanding. But
And
yes,
yeah,
Ukraine was the hub, which is very concerning because there's
for
also,
Spain.
I mean, it's ripe for human trafficking, especially when you have it where we see what went on Epstein Island, like this notion that like rich, because it's rich people that can afford surrogacy, right?
I don't
And so
see rich women being surrogates for poor women who can't have a baby.
no, well, and it costs a lot of money to have a surrogate, and so it's very unsettling to me that men want to do this alone. I don't think it should be allowed.
And even
Like,
women.
but yeah, I don't think surrogacy should be allowed at all, but it's deeply concerning to me that like single men want to do it.
I think that it will allow a lot of like it's the beautiful opportunity for them to do whatever they want with that child. And
Exactly.
I'm not that naive because just because I'm from a South American country, I'm a third worlder and I will always be, no matter where I live. I love my country. I think it's one of the most beautiful countries in the world.
I love
But
Venezuelan people, by the way.
I love
I had
Venezuela.
just I love them.
I love that
Every
country,
person
but
from Venezuela I met I've adored.
everything, like every single day when I was a child, I listened to a story about kidnapping and trafficking and whatever. And that was just like we normalized it a little bit. Like it's not normal and we were scared of it, but part of like dealing with the realities that it was so common to get kidnapped or robbed or killed, like was just making fun of it and joking. That's
You
like a
have
way
to
to
sort
cope.
of do it to get through life. Yeah. I mean, I laugh my way through all my pain.
Yeah, but I
It's
don't
like
know
how you
how
have to
people
do
don't
it.
see. I don't know how people can see that human trafficking. Like this country is the biggest country in Europe on human trafficking because it's the easiest country. Like if you're traveling to Asia to another European country from South America, Madrid, like the city of Madrid is like strategic. Most flights are like they
Um,
stop in Madrid and then they go somewhere else. And it's the same for trafficking, especially people who are coming from the north of Africa, especially Morocco, because it's there,
yeah,
right
that
there.
makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, they bring people from Latin America, they bring people from north of Africa, the Middle East, other parts of Europe, like Western, Eastern Europe women, European women. So it's big. 4 of every 10 men here consume prostitution. I'm reading a book by like an ex-prostitute and it's opening my eyes. And in the middle of this chaos, I'm like so surprised that I am a Gen Zer. I was born in 2001. I'm 21. And most of my colleagues at work who are my age, and most of the people I know who are my age are talking about sex work and are talking about how gender is your choice and are so filled with terrible, like, how are they able to rationalize so much pain? And no matter how I tell them that it's painful and it's not a good thing for women, prostitution and surrogacy, because surrogacy is like reproduction without sex, and prostitution is sex without babies, sex without reproduction. No matter how much I tell them these
Rape.
things, they are,
It's rape.
yeah, it's rape, it's paid rape. They're just so like they have it installed in their brains.
Are you able to have dialogue though? Like, do you have friends that are lib femmes? Like, are they open to dialogue, or do they act very like we
It's very
like we see here, the TRA kind of craziness?
it's hard because like you get canceled so easily. Even as a friend, not even from work or media, whatever, but you like friend cancellation is also a thing. I do have my group of radical feminist friends. I have my group of liberal friends. The girl I'm dating doesn't even know like my opinions. Like I know it's kind of like it was a decision to not tell her. And that's another thing. But here, like my I came to live here with my aunt for a few months before I moved by myself. And she's a lesbian and she's 40 and she's into queer stuff. And she didn't know that I hold these views. And I talking to her friends, I was talking to one of her friends who has a best friend who's gay and has a surrogate baby with his husband. And I tell her, like, I think this is fucked up. No matter how happy these kids are, it's illegal in this country for a reason. She was so mad at me. I was drunk. That's why I like couldn't help but like talk about these
What are they?
things with
What's
her.
that Latin saying? Well, the truth in wine, but vine of I can't remember how it goes, but yeah, that tends to happen.
And my
What
aunt
book are
said
you
like
reading? What's the title? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
my aunt said like stop hanging out with those stupid feminists, las feministas de mierda, those shitty feminists. And I was like, guess what? I was drunk. And that was outside of the bar. Guess what? Yo soy una feminista de mierda. I'm one of those shitty feminists. And I left. And that was very dramatic. But that was like my terror of coming out to her. Like, I don't care. Like, this is how I think. And I think what your friend did is terrible. Those kids may have food and they're happy and smiley, but they don't have a mother because surrogacy.
Yeah, plus we don't know that I've from things I've gone through recently, I realized very deeply how our bodies remember every single moment of trauma we go through. Our brains might not. We might not have the visual memories, but our bodies remember it. So we don't know that trauma that child has in them just from being ripped from their mother at birth,
Yeah,
you
what I know
know?
about like the radical feminists here, they focus on the woman and the trauma and this association, which is, I think, very important. But I'm a teacher,
Yeah.
I work with children, and I am like, I really care about children's rights. And I've always been interested in how, like, adoption and the ethics on how to raise children and what's ethical, what's not. So I can't help but also think about the baby. And I truly think that as newborns, the only thing we know is our mother, not our
Yeah.
adoptive mother, not
No,
even
we
our mother's partner or our father, whatever. We know our mother because that's the body we were inside of, and
yeah.
we recognize the smell of her breast milk and her voice, and we recognize her and we want to be with her. And here in Spain, they have a practice where they put the baby in with her, his or her mom, and the baby climbs by him herself to the breast. They
Oh.
climb. Babies climb. Babies are smart. Newborn babies are human beings too. And even if they don't remember, they don't like, yeah, they're humans. Everyone who's born is already human, already has human rights. And I think like I love radical feminists here talking about surrogacy from the woman's point of view, but I think we need to talk about the babies too, especially those babies when they
Yeah, it's
grow
both.
older. Those babies when they grow up, like when
Yeah.
they're not smiley and well fed, like the friend of my aunt's babies, like they're all smiley. These kids are surrogacy is not bad. These kids are happy, okay, because they don't understand life. They're children. What will happen when they grow up?
Yeah. Plus, like if you have a traumatic birth, it tends I've heard stories from other people, like other women that have had babies, that there was trauma at the birth, and it tends to impact you for life. Like my sister had a
Yeah.
traumatic birth, and she's always been more scared in life than me or my other siblings. And I think it has to do with her traumatic birth. She had and she had an umbilical cord wrapped around her neck, and it she wasn't breathing when she was born. And so they I mean, obviously she ended up being okay, but she's always had more anxiety. And I have a very strong feeling that that's partly related to that. I mean, we had a lot of trauma in our childhood too, but I have a feeling that's part of it.
I do. My brother, not because of his birth, but also because of my mother's pregnancy. She was getting divorced during, like, I remember
Yeah.
that. Not like I remember those moments, but obviously I was a 3, 4 year old, like, but I know that my mom was crying all the time when she was pregnant. She was stressed and she didn't smoke or anything, but I do think there was an impact on my brother. My brother is so
Yeah.
shy. My brother
Oh,
gets
I'm sure.
he gets like very overwhelmed easily when there's something that like triggers him, and when there's something that he does not read as safe. Like when I was moving here, he was very nervous for me moving here because it's not safe, not I don't have a family, like always looking at me here. And he really his I think his temperament can also be due to the fact that my mother's pregnancy was very chaotic and my dad left when he was 6 months old. And my dad is in my life and in my brother's life, and he loves us and helps us. But yeah, that happened when my brother was 6 months old, and I remember maybe his
Yeah, that
temperament
makes
has
a
to
lot of
do with,
sense. I mean,
yeah,
we inherit trauma. So if our mother's going through trauma while we're I mean, it's a symbiotic system. They're together. So I'm sure that has an impact. I mean, I'm not
even the
certain,
breast
but
milk.
like I would strongly assume that that's what. Oh,
Yeah,
that is interesting. It could be
my
the
mom
breast milk.
breastfed me. My mom's great in breastfeeding. Like I saw that with my little sister. We have a younger sister. I was breastfed for 3.5 years. That's a lot of time. And my little sister
Well,
was
that
also
they say
breastfed
up to
for,
like 4 or 5 years
yeah.
old. Yeah.
My sister was also like 3, almost 4 years, just feeding from my mom's breast. But my brother only could take 6 months. And I do think that my mom's milk quality was, of course, affected by the situation, the emotional um, chaos
Yeah.
around my house, my dad leaving. The only,
Well, stress has
like,
it increases your cortisol.
yeah,
So it changes your hormones, like being
my
under
brother did.
stress.
My brother didn't like milk. I remember my brother didn't want to like my mom to breastfeed him. He didn't like
Oh,
it. So he had to be fed in a bottle. Like he would, but it was like very hard to get him to actually drink. And I think because my mom was so like such a dark moment, that's why. My sister, on the other hand, she loved it. Although I was very worried as a child because my mom got implants and I was very nervous. Like I thought that it was going to affect. Then I learned that it was not going to affect her, but that made me nervous when I was, or maybe
yeah,
like
I
I
can
don't know.
understand that. But I think if it like I know that they don't like put like they're I would only be
No,
worried if there was a potential for a leak, but I'd imagine she'd feel if there was a leak in the.
no, there's no issue at all. But I was a child, and I thought there was, like, I was very nervous. Yeah, my mom's breast augmentation was very like it did affect me growing up. But that's like a way, way, way like that's a way different topic to what we're like talking
Oh no,
about
I
with
mean
like radical
it's still
feminists.
related to I mean we're talking about females. So it's still related.
Yeah,
But what
I
book are
mean,
you reading right now? You said you're reading a book?
yes, I'm reading a book called La Revuelta de las Putas, and it's like I would have to look for the translation, but it's like the rebellion or the like taking of action of the prostitutes. and
Oh,
it's
putas is
about,
prostitute? I thought it was bitch.
yeah,
Okay.
no, puta is prostitute, but like the way we use the insult or the word is like in English, bitch. I don't
Okay.
usually use puta anymore after reading the book. I used to say it all the time because in Spanish you say puta vida, puto todo, like everything is puta, 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 puta. But now after reading that and actually understanding how it works and how are putas fabricated, like they're not, they don't born being putas. No girl is born to be a puta. That's something that I learned. And after reading the book, I don't want to say those insults anymore. I There's a very common insult that is hijo de puta in all like Spanish speaking world. Hijo de puta, like son of a prostitute. Not a bitch, but a prostitute. Like son of a prostitute. And I now know about how like sometimes prostitutes have children and how hard it is for them and how hard is it's if they are actually a John's kid, like a client's kid. And now I just every time I say hijo de puta, I just can't. I feel guilty. I feel like, why am I talking like this about these women who are women? And
Yeah.
the author is a woman who used to be a prostitute, and she starts the book saying that we are all women, and prostitutes are taught like are in society we look at prostitutes like the other women. So we have like we are the women, and these are the others, and now I don't see them as the others. I see them as women. And now it's like if a woman is like murdered, a day woman, I don't feel it differently as when a night woman, like prostitute, is murdered. I still feel it
Yeah.
because they're like, I can't believe how much I dehumanized putas. Me, like I've always thought of myself as very like kind and empathetic and smart, but now I'm like, wow, all these women for so long I thought of them like they were other things, almost other species. I dehumanized them.
I think we do that to separate. I think it's a cognitive dissonance thing. Like, it's easier to not, like, if you dehumanize them, then the pain isn't real. Then like the pain that we're participating in or passively causing potentially, we disconnect from it in that way. It makes
It's
sense. Plus,
easier.
you were young too, and I think that a lot
Yeah,
of women go through a phase of being a woman hater or a little bit, or
not
I
a
mean,
woman
maybe not a
hater,
woman
but
hater, but like,
I didn't see them fully as my equals
right.
because
Okay.
if someone like let's say a landlord manipulates a woman into having sex with him, like, okay, I'm going to pardon this month of rent because I see that you are having difficulties to pay if you sleep with me. And this man, like this woman has to have sex with the landlord and does not enjoy it and tells the story, I would feel the pain like, wow, that's crazy and that's so hideous how he manipulated you and how you don't have a penny so that he could like fuck you.
You don't
I
really
would
have a
feel
choice
that.
at
I
that
was like,
point. If you
I was
like
like,
have to choose between being homeless or evicted and having sex with someone,
yeah.
then that's
Or
you're,
even not
it's
homeless,
coerced
but
rape.
like, I don't know, you need to pay your bills, you need to feed your children, whatever. You need to send money to South America, which is like a lot of girls are in that situation.
Well,
I
I was going to
myself,
ask you that if how much of the prostitutes in Spain are immigrants.
almost all of them.
Yeah, that's
And
what I
they wouldn't
thought.
be like, I guess there's a minority of Spanish women who are prostitutes, but most of prostitutes are Latin American and North African, which is not surprising. But if it was like this case of a woman who had to send money to her mother or her father in Venezuela, I would be like, oh my God, this is so horrible. But if I thought of a woman being a sex worker and this same landlord going to her the club where she works and paying her to basically beat her up, but it's through like in exchange of money, and this prostitute would say yes. I thought that was okay. That's isn't that crazy? Like
Yeah.
that's like or not even beating her up. Maybe that I would like still raise my eyebrows to that. But like if a sex worker would say like, yeah, he wanted me to have anal, even if I only paid for vaginal, like I would be like, well, but you're a sex worker. I mean, that's your daily life. Like that's what I would think. And yes, that's why I don't think of myself like a saint. I
Oh, I
dehumanize
mean,
these women.
we all take time to wake up. I mean, I never liked the idea of prostitution. It always made me sad, but I I always came from it with a view that we have to protect these women. And so if we legalize it and and make sure that, they have protection, they have testing available, all that kind of stuff, they have due compensation, then that's how it should be. And I was under the impression that making it legal would make them safer, but it's just not the case.
No,
Like beyond the fact that it's paid rape, which it is, it doesn't legalizing sex work doesn't make the exploited woman any safer.
no, like is it like a workplace risk to be murdered by your client? Or what if you don't satisfy your client enough? Is it like you're lacking like your work skills or what? What are you going to regulate? How good they suck this man's
Well, I mean, you'd
members? Like,
regulate, but yeah, like I don't think it's possible to regulate it. But like if my young naive 20 something mind, what really changed my perspective though on sexual exploitation was traveling to Amsterdam when I was 22, and I went to the red light district, and I immediately saw that there were primarily women of color, um that 90% of, like, almost all of them were immigrants, and that immediately I just was like, oh, okay. I saw it in a whole different light when I saw that it was just like, I'm in this white country where almost everyone's blonde or looks like me, and then every single woman I saw in those horrible glass rooms, like they're sex dolls. Like it was just a horrifying experience for me. And I thought it was like I had this naive notion of sexual empowerment, and then I went there and I was like, this is horrible. It just made me feel sick inside.
same, I did have that. Like I like for me it was the book. For you it was like real life experience of looking at the women. But for me, like I had this fake empowerment idea, like the happy meal feminists have. And I don't blame them. It's a process. I was there and now I'm not
Well, it's
because I
conditioning too.
it's conditioning too. But like
Yeah.
it's not only misogyny and the exploitation of women, it's also colonialism and like the hate of people from other races. I'm thinking that like that they are more animal than us. Like I am from Venezuela, but I am white. Like maybe not white blonde like American white people and like, but I am white. And I was born into a family, like I was born into middle class and I'm white and I got an education. I learned English. I was not going to end up a prostitute easily. But most Venezuelans and Colombians who are here in Spain being prostitutes who are my age, probably some women were born the same exact day as me. Most of them are black and they were born into poor families and they didn't learn English. So I just had to open my eyes and acknowledge all of these things. Like I am lucky because I was born in Venezuela, but I was born middle class and my family protected me. But you know how like crazy it is that now girls are starting to like think about being prostitutes. Even my friends, like, and I might confess this to you, when I was 18, I even thought of selling my pictures in OnlyFans.
Oh,
And some of my friends thought of being sugar babies. And even I think one of them finally did it. I don't know, she was my classmate. She was not my friend, but like we were middle class and we were white and we had an education, but we somehow believed we had our erotic capital. We had our body as a merchandise. It's crazy. Even the ones who are lucky enough to like not enter that system can now enter to that system.
Yeah,
Not
I
the
went
same
through
way,
that.
but
Well,
yeah.
I over sexualized myself in the film industry, and I always had a sick like a there was always a piece of me I was suppressing when I did that kind of thing. Where I'd be like, I would say out loud it was empowering. I would act like it was empowering, but like there was always a piece of me that was like, this isn't what you're supposed to be doing. And I mean, the last project I did, I really did like the film, and I don't particularly regret doing it, but I had to get past that conditioning that that exploiting your sexuality is somehow empowering. Now, I never did anything like sex work or an
But was it like
OnlyFans or anything.
porn?
No, it wasn't porn. The film was called Porno. It was untitled when I agreed to do it. It was a lot of abuse. That's partly why I left the industry. It was an
Oh, it's like
untitled.
semi-porn, like
No,
erotic
it's not at all porn. It's a
film.
film. No, I mean, I was nude in the film, but it's not. It's a horror comedy.
Oh,
There's no porn element to it at all.
wow.
It was just called Porno because of the plot line, but it was they titled it after the fact, which was clearly intentional. Like I think this was their intention the whole time. Uh, and then they put me nude on the poster. Um, I showed up to South by Southwest. They violated my contract. The producer was awful. They violated my contract, which said there was going to be no nude stills used for promotional materials, and they put me nude on the poster, which I found out the morning I arrived at South by Southwest because that's where the film premiered. It was extremely traumatic. Um, and and then it was supposed to have a theatrical release on April 10th, 2020. And that obviously got canceled because of COVID. So they did like a digital release, but like I was, promoting the film during lockdown. And then a bunch of other repressed trauma came up, and that's why I ended up leaving the industry. Because I just was like, I don't want to be a part of this anymore. It's very exploitative industry, but I would consider that like sex work adjacent. I was nude on film in a movie. But it seems to be that people are under the impression that I was the formerly exploited sexually in porn, and I wasn't. It's simply because I was naked in a movie called Porno, which I cried when I read the title. Like I found out at an audition, the casting director that cast me in the film called me in for another project to audition for, and was like, "Did you see what they titled it?" And I was like, "No." And she told me, and I was just horrified. I went home and sobbed because it's one thing to be naked in a film, but it's an entirely different thing to be naked in a movie called Porno. And now it's clear that some people like you were under the impression that I was in a pornography film, and I wasn't. I've never been.
No, I didn't know. I just thought because of like you said, the film industry hyper sexualized. I assumed.
Oh, okay. No, I used to be an actress, which I still sort of am doing it, but now I'm just going to be exclusively doing theater because that's always what I love the most anyway. So I moved to Dallas and I booked a show here, and I'm doing that, and trying to kind of make a new life for myself, figuring myself out past post the last 12 years of my life.
I feel the same. I'm about to start another chapter in Belgium. But just to like wrap up, I tried to understand why I wanted to sell my body, not as like a sex worker, but like selling bits of my body, pictures of my feet, pictures of my, I don't know, my body, um, videos of me. I was in the age where I just stopped feeling shame and stopped repressing myself. I stopped hating my body. I hadn't hated my body for most of my teenage. I was 18.
Mm.
I was 18. I started hating my body. I actually felt my body beautiful. Even the things that I still don't like that much. I looked at me like at the full picture. I'm like, I'm very attractive. I'm very young. I
You're
stopped hating myself. I
beautiful.
started I started
Yeah.
loving my boobs, my small boobs. I had this thing with my mom. She had the same boobs as me, and then she got the implants, whatever. I stopped hating my body. I stopped repressing my sexuality, like what I wanted in bed, who I wanted in bed, because I stopped repressing. like me, my homosexuality, I was finally okay. I was finally enjoying my sexuality. Maybe I did not have a stable partner. I wanted a stable partner, but I didn't have one. But I
Well,
was
you're
enjoying
very
my sex
young.
life. Yeah, I was enjoying my sex life. I was starting to enjoy my sex life. I tried with men, I tried with women. I understood myself. And when I was already 18, I understood most of what I like the beginnings of my sex life and my adulthood. I was in the eve of womanhood. I didn't even call myself a woman because I it felt so big. I couldn't call myself a woman. I was like, I am a girl, I'm a chica. And I could call myself a woman if I put the word joven, like young, like joven mujer. Okay, like young woman. I can't do that. But just woman, no, because I was 18. I was like in the eve of adulthood. And that's when I felt the most confident. And that's when I felt, oh, I'm so pretty. I'm worth a lot. I don't need to be perfect. I don't need to be this perfect siren South American stereotype. I can be myself. I can enjoy my life. And that's when I thought, let's sell this. Like when I finally had it, I thought because I was conditioned to think that women have this thing and they can sell it and they need to, you know, be like productive with their own erotical capital. And I thought, let's sell parts of myself. Like I was getting into growing my body hair. Like sometimes I shave, it's 40 degrees here in Madrid. I'm not going to like grow my body hair now because ugh. But I used to have like my full body hair and I like finally stopped hating my body hair because I love body hair in women. I think like women that shave and women that don't shave are attractive. I think both like archetypes are beautiful, but I was learning to accept and love my body hair, my armpit hair, my pubic hair, my leg hair. And I wanted to sell pictures of that because I learned very quickly that it was a fetish for men because I was just posting random pictures that showed my armpit hair at the beach and people were commenting, like men were commenting on my like the other account I
Men will
have.
fetishize anything about a woman, I'm learning.
Man, I shaved
I
my
I
head down to zero and men followed me like fetishists, man, like like yeah, that had like accounts of like bold girls. So I was all hairy. There was a fetishist. I was all shaved, even my head. There was a fetishist.
yeah,
Man,
there's always going to be one no matter what women do.
peace.
I
I want
stopped
to sell my
shaving
peace.
last year as an exercise. I don't know if I'll ever, I mean I might, but I did it more because I wanted to exercise not appealing to the male gaze. Apparently they don't care anyway. But
No.
I've always, felt I had to like look perfect and be perfect. And I felt not even, I felt guilty like going out without shaved legs. Like it wasn't even
Guilty, but like
yeah, I would
spiky,
feel
like
guilt.
stubble.
Yeah. Or like not having my toes manicured. Um, like not like I would feel like I guilty, not even like shame, like I would feel like I was doing something wrong. And so I learned when I decided to, like I had, some repressed trauma surface and I had this huge epiphany moment where I was like, holy shit, you've never loved yourself. You've never like you've never I've always put myself like I would just bend myself in any way possible to be like the perfect kind of woman. And so I decided I needed to be unapologetically real. And like, so I was like, I'm not going to shave my legs for a while. I'm not going to date for a year. And it's been a year, over a year now since I haven't even gone on a single date. I'm feeling a lot more empowered, but I do feel like I do also feel myself retreating from life. So I need to like decide if I don't know what, but yeah, it was an exercise of ripping off the discomfort of not being perfect,
Hmm.
like in terms of appealing to that male gaze and being like the archetype. Because I always, I mean, even the roles, like everything, it's like I've always been like a seductress, a sex pot, like that kind of thing. And so I was like, I don't want to do this anymore in all the ways.
How old are you? I don't
I'm
even know that.
36.
What?
Mhm.
You don't look 36. 36.
Thank you.
Okay. I guess it's also like I'm so young and I got to learn about the body hair thing so young because
Yeah, your
I never
generation is
liked to
more
shave.
open with having body hair
Like I
than
never liked
than
to. And also
millennials.
America. America,
Well,
like
I'm an elder millennial too, so I mean, I grew up with Britney Spears being shamed for like not being a virgin. It's just like you
for
know, I
not
grew up
being
with
a
Jessica
virgin.
Simpson. Yeah, like because it like, and then Jessica Simpson was what, a size 6 and being called a whale. Like it's a different. I'm an elder millennial. It's a very different experience growing up in that world
I
versus
guess.
like there are some things I find very unsettling with what Gen Z is growing up with. Like obviously all the internet, all the um I mean, all the OnlyFans, like I can't imagine the trauma of growing up with Instagram and Facebook in junior
It's
high and high
terrible.
school. Like, yeah, I mean, I was bullied really bad in junior high and early high school, and I mean, it had an impact on me, and I can't imagine that being all over the internet because, of course, the bullying's going to happen on Facebook or on Instagram or on TikTok if you're getting bullied. So I just the amount of trauma that can cause is really it breaks my heart. So there's a lot of things that Gen
Yeah.
Z has to go through that I didn't have to go through, but there is more of like a body positivity and there's there girls growing their armpit hair out like that would be like you wouldn't have done that like in when I was growing up that like women my mom wouldn't let me shave my legs till I was in 8th grade and I was mortified like
Wow. When I was a teenager, I do have like pretty blonde leg hair. My armpit hair and everything else is quite brunette, but my leg hair is like blondish, and I couldn't care less. When I was a teenager, I found it unattractive, and I thought like I was like kind of guilty of not having shaved legs, but I was just they're like right now I'm shaved, but like I couldn't go back, like I can't go back to perpetual shaving. That's just like I don't want to be a slave of the razor ever again. I was 19 when I stopped shaving for a couple of months, a year, and now I'm the same way. Like I'm not full-time shaved. I grow my armpit hair for all of the colder months and my leg hair, and then I shave during the summer if I feel like shaving for a special thing. I do that, but I do love having my armpit hair. At first, I thought it was masculine, and I accepted it. Like I when I cut my hair, I shaped my hair. I was like, this is a little bit masculine because this is how we've been raised. Looking at men, it's a masculine haircut. But I accept myself because being a little bit masculine is not a crime. I need to break gender norms. And when I grew my hair, was the same. Like this is a little bit masculine because whatever. And I was like, but why? If there's something feminine in this world, is the hair that grows on your feminine sexual organ. Come on, it's not masculine. I used to look like I thought it was masculine, but now I don't. Like how is it masculine? It's your armpit hair, your
plus
pubic hair, your leg hair.
honestly vaginal hair protects you I feel a lot more vaginally healthy without shaving and I used to shave it bare for
I
because
know, like
I would feel guilty about having my natural hair like it's like I would feel so much guilt and shame like even for if I like had sex with something like that it just was a lot of I had to decondition myself a lot but
that I
it
never
is
shaved. Like
you're much more inclined to get yeast infections you're much it's when you shave and you don't like
that
it's
one,
protective it helps us.
I never shaved like I shaved like the bikini line, whatever would be visible in a bikini, and I was still stressed if there was stubble, and it's very hard to get a close clean shave there. But I would like feel guilty if something showed. But that like the vaginal hair, like the labia and the mount, I never shaved because I knew that it was healthier for you because my grandma told me that it was healthier
It
for
is
you,
it's much
and
I can tell I used to have chronic yeast infections and I don't anymore it's like oh
but
like
I did feel guilt. I did feel guilt the first time I was going to like hook up with a guy at first, like at the beginnings of my sex life, because I was like still like having faith that I was bisexual. Didn't work. I tried several times with different guys. It didn't work. But I was there and I just had my pubes. it was part of my body. It was so natural. I was not ashamed. I didn't feel any special way about my pubes. I trimmed them and but nothing like that. And then when he was about to like see me naked and he wanted to pull my pants down, that's when I felt like I cannot let him see me. And I had never felt like this ever, ever. And when he was about to see me, that's when I felt guilt. And when I nothing ended up happening that day. And when I got home, I shaved everything for the first time ever. And part of me was like, this is so horrible. I look like when I was 12. But another part of me was like, oh, I look like the porn. That's yeah, whatever. And I used to watch porn that time. Now I don't. It wasn't a process,
Oh,
but
you
like
did? I've never watched
I don't
porn.
know.
Mm.
I did
It's
watch
always
porn.
made me feel very sick. Like even when it would pop up on my screen, I've never like that's partly also why I was so horrified being called in a movie called porno because I've just always been. But I was raised Catholic, so I just had a very
I was raised evangelical, but it was the worst
okay.
because I watch porn, but never mainstream porn because that grossed me out. No
Okay, so
matter,
what
like
kind of porn did you watch?
the most homemade, and I think this is even worse. Like watching these things, they're like it's so ironic. I felt superior to the ones who saw mainstream porn because I saw like married couples or like homemade. Um, I used to watch only straight porn until I stopped torturing myself, and I was like, I'm going to allow myself to watch lesbian porn, which is I think lesbian porn is horrible. It's made for men, but I used to watch that like real lesbians. If they were lesbians, like I liked it, and I did like watching that because I like looked for like the most like homemade, not violent, real looking bodies, like pubes and like stretch marks and whatever. But then I was like, why am I watching random people have sex instead of going and enjoying my own sex life? This is weird. I pictured them filming themselves and editing, and I was like, why am I watching this? Why am I not enjoying my own sex life? Why am I looking at these people scissoring in weird ways that are not realistic? Like, why?
Yeah, it's very sad to me that children are growing up with porn being their main avenue to understand and be introduced to sexuality instead of discovering it themselves. There's something very beautiful about developing into your sexuality naturally and, having that those first innocent experiences with somebody and there's a part that's really important developmental part of life that like, like it it just makes me so God, it makes me very sad that's it takes the magic and beauty out of what's supposed to be really special,
Yes,
and
I'm so sad.
I think about
Too.
I lost my virginity in a very special way with a boyfriend I loved, and I mean I know some people don't have might not have. I mean, I guess I didn't. I lost my virginity when I was a child, but in terms of actually like my choice in it, like I don't know. It makes me very sad that like a generation of children are like basically growing up being sexually abused by being exposed to pornography, and it's robbing them of so much, not only of their innocence, but of what there's that natural development that they're supposed to be able to have, which is it really should be a beautiful thing about life.
I had like I had never had sex when I watched porn. Like I watched porn before having
That's
sex, and
yeah.
if I
Yeah.
could do something like I would go back on time and not watch any of that and let my first experiences, the good, the bad, the embarrassing, the pleasurable, be out of my own head and truly be present and not feel like I had to perform a certain video I watched. I think like Billie Eilish, I don't know if you know this artist.
Mhm.
She had an interview. We are the same age. She was born 3 days after I was born. And she said like porn is a disgrace. And I truly stand by that. I think porn is a disgrace. I wish I could just discover my sexuality, my sexual orientation, pleasure without having all this porn in my head. I wish I didn't have
Yeah.
access to porn. It's sad that I could not have my first time like you, like
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's
repressed
sad.
my sexual trauma from childhood, so I didn't remember it until later in life. So I had that natural in my mind, natural experiences. Now there was always something, I knew there was something wrong a bit. Like now that I look back on it, my life makes more sense. But my first boyfriend was a wonderful person and we're still friends, and that part I really appreciate about my life. You know, like walking through it with somebody, like having that experience, like the discovering each other, discovering sexuality together, I think is really important. And I wish that that could be protected for kids.
That's what saddens me the most. Children.
Yeah.
Like, if it
Yeah.
wasn't me, at least I want to make something for the next generation to experience that, because nothing in sex education, like in school, teaches you about desire, about discovering your bodies, about how great it is. It's all about how sex is a good thing, it's a bad thing. You need to be careful because there's STDs, because pregnancy. But there's nothing about desire. There's nothing about human
Well, then
connection
now there
and
is, but they're trying to push porn on it and kink. Like
yeah,
it's going like I do think sexual education, I don't even know if I agree with it even being I mean, I think it's important because I think that we need to learn about the risks of pregnancy and the STDs. I think that is important knowledge
it's
to have
important.
and part, but I
But
don't think
also
it
the
should go
emotional is
beyond that.
important, like the emotional component of it.
Yeah, but then I just worry about them taking it too far because it's like we've gone from one direction to the complete polar opposite where it's like they're talking about porn and kink and anal sex and toys, and that is absolutely not okay to me to teach that to children or to kids.
It's not the time or place. If they want to learn about sex toys and kinks or whatever, people will eventually learn. But I think it's more like you need to cover
It
the
disrupts the natural
physical.
development,
Yeah,
you
you need
know.
to cover the physical aspects like STDs, whatever. But you
Yeah,
also, like, instead of
basics.
teaching about sex toys or kinks, you should teach about love, desire, connection, even if it's casual, even if it's not your partner. Like,
Yeah.
my sex education lacked the emotional component, like what sex actually can do for you,
I
the
think
good and the
personally,
bad.
I think that should be a parent conversation when it talks about love and I don't know. I'm very at this point I'm very reluctant to give grace to any school. Like I just think it should be really rigid, regimented, and strictly teach them the basics. And I think that parent conversation should be the rest of it. I don't know. But I mean it's because I'm seeing what's going on in the US. I used to be way more pro sex ed, but just seeing what's being federalized and they're introducing gender into it too. So now sex ed classes will talk about puberty blockers and it's a mess and cross sex hormones and various genders. And it's becoming Sodom and Gomorrah. 40% of children are
Yes,
spammed porn on a daily basis. Grade school children.
that's because I began when I was 16, and even when I was 16 I felt that I was too young. But now
Too
I have a
young.
12-year-old. I have a 12-year-old sister, and I don't like to think about that, but that's the
Oh.
reality. She probably has watched porn and she's 12. She's crazy.
It's so sad. And then girls are getting anal tears and it's just
Because they want to reproduce sex, and like they want to reproduce porn, but porn is not sex, actually. Like,
yeah.
most of it's not
Well, and you even
realistic
see
at
it
all.
with like the strangling. Like I've always
How?
been in a relationship until more recently. Like I was just bounced from one serious relationship to the next. So I really didn't date casually or like date until I was in my 30s. And you can see an age difference in terms of behavior and sex. And you can tell which ones were like raised on porn and they'll start this kind of thing like it's nothing. Like it's very unsettling. You can see the difference, and that's just talking about men that are slightly younger than me, and they didn't have access to porn really like that until high school. So I shudder to think what's happening now, and you see it even with like second graders sexually abusing girls. That is porn learned behavior. That is not natural. That is not normal. That is learned
Yeah,
behavior from being groomed through porn.
completely. I agree. I was teaching 10-year-old boys and girls, and I saw behavior, like the sounds they made sometimes to bother the girl classmates, and I saw behaviors and words and drawings that I expected to see with 15, 14, like post-pubescent kids, like teenagers. Who, well,
Yeah.
it makes a little bit like it's not right, like to bother your classmates with those things. But I lived it as a 16-year-old, 15, 14 even, not that much, 15, 16, and I saw those sort of comments and moans and whatever from 10-year-olds and 9-year-olds, and that's very concerning because that's not natural. There's no way they are
No.
getting that just from their heads. I feel bad for boys because that's one of the things in radical feminism here in Spain. Most of them don't allow you to feel bad for boys, and
Oh,
I understand, like,
yeah.
I
In
understand.
my view, it's almost worse. It's like spiritual genocide. Like, I don't think that girls are like, I think that boys are being robbed of their ability to love. If they're, because if it affects the male brain differently, um, where it reduces gray matter, it makes them more prone to criminality, violent behavior. It makes them um less able to seek out long-term goals, and like everything's short-term gratification. And it, to me, it's like robbing their ability to be able to love. I feel very deeply for boys. Girls are obviously
Yeah.
experiencing the brunt of the abuse, but I don't think girls are being robbed of their ability to be human beings and to love. And I don't know,
They're
and I know
dehumanized by
I've said
boys.
this
Like
before,
they're
and
being
I've
dehumanized
been
by boys, but it's not the same because it's
yeah,
like I do think, yeah, I agree with you
yeah,
100%.
I've said that, and I feel like radfems have disagreed and disliked, but I'll stand by it. It's child abuse across the board, but I really worry about the spiritual genocide of boys.
I do. The lack of capacity of experiencing intimacy and connection and love. And you know how I read of this book that made me understood that no girl is born to be a prostitute. Like no girl is born with a special gene to
Yeah,
like later on become a prostitute. She's groomed into that. She's abused. She's fabricated
yeah.
into a prostitute. She's fabricated. If it was a factory, that's how, like, yes, they are made to be this way. They're conditioned. I was conditioned to in a process, like a series of years, to finally at 18, when I didn't hate my body, think, oh, I can sell myself or parts of myself. I feel the same for boys. No boy is born a rapist. Like men are not, like boys are not born that, like, with the
They're
lack of being
susceptible
able to
to it, but
feel.
they're not born that
They're
way.
susceptible to it, but like
Yeah.
they are not born with that misogyny, like
No,
hating women, wanting to use them as products, wanting to buy them.
no.
Johns are not born. Like kids not are
Deviancy
not
is
born a John.
developed. Yeah, deviancy is a developed. It's like any addiction. It's developed. It's not, you're not born that way. I mean,
So yeah.
some boys are going to be born to be more susceptible to that. So if they're exposed to porn, they might have a shorter trigger. That's how addiction works. And if you're hereditary susceptibility or whatever, for whatever reason, some boys or men are going to be more susceptible to that, and they're going to hit their trigger quicker, but they're not born deviants.
They're not born rapists. Like they I don't
No,
think
there is
men
no
are
born
born.
minor attracted person. There is no born rapist. Yeah, I
There's no
100% agree with you.
born prostitute, like
Yeah.
John, like this buyer, this prostitute buyer, like the same. Like girls are not born prostitutes. It's a process that conditions them. And
Yeah. Hmm.
boys are not born like Johns, consumers of prostitution. Like they're not. It's social, and I don't have a lot of hope, actually. It's just terrible.
No,
What I see in my
I don't
generation,
either.
what I see in my generation, like really makes me worry for my brother who's 17 and my sister who's 12. But I truly don't know about like the next generations. Like it's just
I mean, I think
terrible.
there's a strong chance we're gonna that very soon there are going to be very, very, very few, if not any, good men. Like to be raising like so. I had an interview with John Euler who works with incarcerated sex offenders, and he said 100% of them were deeply steeped in pornography, without question, without exception. And so now we have an entire global generation of boys being raised on porn. What is that going to do to our future? It should be considered a crisis, but it's taboo almost to even mention porn as being something that's causing harm. Like it's implicated in the transgender movement. It's implicated, I believe, implicated in mass shootings. Like
Yeah.
I shudder to think, oh, I 100% think that porn is, I'm going to try to actually write about that and do research on it. Because I'm convinced that eradicating porn would do a lot more than banning guns to stop mass shootings.
I
I
just
mean, they're violent incels
Yeah, I just think that
who,
if you're having constant stimuli and you're orgasming, you're having orgasms too, violence, you end up eroticizing violence. And
yeah,
men do it, men have that, but and I'm concerned by like about the effects of men eroticizing violence through porn, but I'm also concerned about women eroticizing and demanding violence because of that porn. Like already, like patriarchy makes women constantly eroticize violence. That's one thing. We all know that. But imagine me at 16 watching girls being choked and thinking it was hot and masturbating to it. Now, like the first time someone put her hand on my neck, I freaked out because I am not damaged. Like I see that as what it is. It's you're choking me. Stop. Don't put your hand on my neck. That triggers my life. I don't want that. This is not pleasurable. But when I was 16, I remember at first watching this media and that's why I stopped watching that mainstream porn because I just couldn't stand violence. That's why I went for the most like um flower eater like amateur, very homemade porn because I just couldn't stand those like violence things. But millions and
yeah.
millions and millions of boys and girls watch that every day. And everything, so even in music, Latin American music like reggaeton, the lyrics are so violent. The ones like and now there's female singers who are singing those lyrics, and that's even more concerning because women are like men say that women ask for that violence. And do you know what happened here, La Manada? It was a famous case of a girl who was raped by five very young men, like my age. She was very young too. She was raped and it was like filmed. And like during the judgment of these men, like the official, the juries, one of them said that what he saw on the videos was a woman enjoying sex. But he said like obviously he's porn obsessed, that jury, because how are you going to see a girl basically in the floor? She didn't say no and she didn't apply resistance because she was shocked because
And she was dissociating, and
she was dissociating.
she
Like
was freezing. Like it's
she was freezing and
fight,
she was
fly, or freeze.
faking. She was
Freeze.
like this jury said that he saw a woman enjoying sex because he was moaning. Come on. I had to like do that process. Like I was not
Also,
associated with that once. I went through that. Once I had an experience with a guy where I was not aware of how strong he was. And I didn't want to have sex with him, but I wanted to provoke him in front of my friends so that they saw that I was, like winning this boy, which was terrible on my part. But I remember that we were like in a quiet spot in the hotel. We were all together. It was a hotel party. And we were in like a different room, like by a curtain. And I remember just kissing him and provoking him. And everyone was like, oh my God, they're kissing, whatever, which is a teenage shitty experience. Well, I was not a teenager. I was 19. I was a teenager. I was it was not so long ago. And then he was like a gym bro. And I was like, I have this control. Like, I'm just going to stop now. No, I don't want anymore. And then he picked me like he grabbed me by the hips, and I was just because he was so strong. I'm so skinny. He's so strong. He picked me like if I were like a feather, and I just was shocked, so shocked that I wasn't able to say anything. My friends were there. I like in the other room, in the next room, divided by a curtain. I could say, "Hey guys," but I just couldn't say anything. And he took me to the bathroom, and it happened. And I was like, I thought to myself, you have two options. Number one, you breathe and it's not going to hurt much to just pretend you're enjoying it, just fake it, and just be bland, just let it happen and just breathe and stay in your head, your body, stay in your head. Think of, I thought of meadows and flowers until it was over. And I tried to just fake it and put like I didn't want him to know that I was not enjoying it. Obviously, it's very easy to know that someone's not enjoying, especially a woman, if she's not lubricated enough. Like this guy obviously knew, but whatever. And the other option was actually like stopping him or trying to stop him. But I was like, if I do that and if I don't focus on my mind, it's going to hurt. Like trying to pulling him or whatever, or like not disassociating is going to hurt. And even if my friends hear me, it's going to hurt. The shame, it's going to hurt. Like I don't want this to be a thing. I don't want these guys to know. I don't want no one to like. I'm so ashamed, and I don't want my body. I don't want my genitals to hurt. So I chose the disassociating route, and there I was, and it was like 10 minutes, but it was like eternal. So that happened to me, and that went back to my mind when I saw that on TV. Like, how is this man who is supposed to protect us and our rights as a jury saying that what he saw in that tape of a girl, a young woman, being raped by five guys was her enjoying sex because she was not protesting, she was not saying no, and she was moaning. Like, come on, she's on the floor, laying there and she's in shock. Like
And
it's so
this was
crazy.
in Spain.
This was in Spain, La Manada. It's a very famous case,
Okay.
and
Oh,
yeah, it's just terrible.
and now, do you notice any of this sort of stuff besides what you told me about the 9-year-old boys like making moaning noises? Are you feeling any pressure to participate in the gender woo-woo as a teacher in Spain?
Yes, actually, like when I was in the eve of my adulthood, I was just learning, like I was just starting to call myself a woman because I was a girl before. That's when I learned that you don't need to be born a woman to be a woman. Like all these woo-woo things were in my mind since I was graduating from high school because that was like I was the first generation who learned about it as very like 18, 17. And I did not believe on it that much. There was something about it that made me hesitate. Like I was like, but it was always there. And I had this social thing that I would talk like politically correct. And I would call people like with the letter E because in English you have they, which is great because you don't need to make up any different words. In Spanish, we have os for masculine nouns and a for feminine nouns, and then we have E for neutral, like the new thing. Instead of being contenta, which is happy, contento, happy but a male, contente. So we used letter E, which sounds kind of French and funny. But I used to speak like that. And I felt obliged to speak like that on social academic situations where when I was working with children. If there was los niñes, the children, like los niñes, not los niños, which is the usual like way to describe kids, but los niñes, les niñes, because I was not sure if there was a little boy or girl who did not identify with any of the sexes. So it was crazy. I did experience working in a school here. Like I never had a trans kid come to me or a non-binary
Okay.
child, which is very funny. A non-binary child is like a vegan cat.
Yeah.
But yes, it's even if there's no one trans around, you still feel like you need to speak in neutral.
Does the school push that? Does the school impose that on you?
Not really. It's just expected.
Okay.
I think I felt more pressure, like pressure, not from my bosses, but from the colleagues because they were very
Mm.
young, very queer, very. So I felt like I had to just like, I'm new here, I'm an immigrant, I
Assimilate
need
with,
to
yeah.
just assimilate and say things with an
So
E.
so are you still feeling that way? Are you still, or is that how it still is? Like, because
No,
I
I
mean,
decided
when
to
did you start
progress.
coming out as a rad femme? Did you move to Spain as a rad femme?
I'm not very public. Like
Okay.
anyone who knows me well knows that I'm a feminist. But those
The
colleagues
real
that
kind, the
were
real kind of
they're real
feminist.
kind. The only kind of feminist, in my opinion. Because how much of a feminist are you if you think that men can be women?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
and that's something that I say now, but a year ago, I did not say that. I still saw them as feminists, right? And I do respect them. And I agree with liberal feminists like on some things, but I don't think they're feminists actually.
No,
Because
they're not.
if they think that being a woman is something you can opt out of, then they miss the point. The whole point of feminism is like we are different from men. That's
Yeah.
why we're oppressed. And there you go. That's it.
Sex-based,
Being a
yeah.
woman. It's
It's
sex-based
always been
oppression.
sex-based.
It's always
Yeah.
been sex-based. So yeah, no, they're not really feminists. But that I don't speak like that anymore. I don't speak with an E. I don't use inclusive language. I do in Spanish, I do say the feminine and the masculine. Instead of saying the plural niños, I say niños y niñas, like boys and girls, instead of niños, because that sounds like I'm only acknowledging male kids. I try to be
Yeah.
inclusive, but for both sexes. I'm not inclusive with todes, y. I'm not using the non-binary language anymore.
It's interesting that Spanish has not like the how do you feel about the X being imposed from English speaking countries onto Spanish?
Latinx sounds like Kleenex.
Like Kleenex. Yeah,
Like
I
like a taco brand.
every Latin person I speak to or Hispanic person I speak to, it can't stand the X thing. And I was just like, it's such a just
First
it's
of
so
all,
dumb. Hmm?
why do you say Latino community? Like, I will never understand that people in the States say the Latino community, the Latin. That's
Well,
weird.
now they
Why do
say the
you use that
Latinx
O?
community.
But why would you have an X? You don't need the X.
And just say
Because you don't
Latin.
need the O or the A because grammatically it makes no sense.
Yeah,
The English language does not have that feature. You don't have grammatical gender like we have. You have she and he, but you don't have adjectives like or
right.
masculine and feminine. First of all, why is it the Latino community and not the Latina community? Because community, if you are following that logic, community in Spanish, it's comunidad. Comunidad is a feminine noun. So if they were trying to sound like conjugate like the Spanish, like sound like the Spanish language, they would say the Latina community, as community is a feminine noun in Spanish. But they say Latino community. Why is it Latino? Why are they evoking men anyway? And why is it
History.
always like, yeah, they're always evoking men. Okay, in Latin languages, like Romance languages are like that. They do always evoke men. It's true. But they only changed it for an X when the concept of non-binary appeared. Not
Oh, of course.
before,
Yeah.
because not before they did not want to include the women, Latina. They always wanted to just like use the O. I don't understand because English has a five-letter word that's gender neutral and makes complete sense to the grammar of the language.
Well,
Latin,
it's like changing,
Latin,
yeah, it's like changing folks
Latin.
to folks. It's like folks is already a gender neutral term. We don't need to add an X to it. It makes me want to throw up when I read it.
Latin is
FOLX.
already gender neutral. Like Latin
Yeah.
American, Latin is already gender neutral and it's English. You don't need to use the O or the A or the X. I'm mad at the people that use Latinx because I'm mad too at people that use the O. Why? It doesn't make sense. Why would you use that word? You like it's so weird. But it's also like something that Latin Americans that live in the States would use, but not Latin Americans
Yeah,
from the mainland.
exactly. I don't even think many Latin Americans use it in the States. I mean, some of them that are captured, but it's mostly, stemming from top down in universities and
And why
organizations.
you cannot
Because
even
X is
read Latinx
apparently,
in Spanish.
yeah,
It in Spanish
yeah,
it doesn't read like Latinx. It's like Latinx or Latinx. If you wanted to make it sense, make it make sense, you would use the E that I told you about, like
yeah,
Latine, not Latinx or Latinx X, blah,
yeah.
blah,
It's very colonial to
Latine.
add an X to a language that's not even in your. It's yeah. It's Venezuela is captured as like Western Europe, like Spain. I think didn't Spain recently pass a law about self ID?
Oh, it's so crazy. Yes. La ley trans, the trans law. No, in South America, it's almost non-existent. In Argentina, they do have the law, and in Brazil, they do. But
Yeah, I
I
was gonna
think
say because
like Brazil,
Brazil, I mean, a feminist faced
yeah,
like 36 years or something in prison for misgendering.
Brazil and Argentina are like the highlight of South America. Everything else, like people cannot, like gay people can't get married in
Okay,
Venezuela, like, and it's non-existent. It's very far
okay.
behind. But in Argentina and Brazil, I do know like they do have these weird laws. But here in Spain, it's just weird and crazy. It's the new law makes 16-year-olds capable of changing their sex in their ID and their names. Like 16-year-olds, come on, 16, not even an adult.
And then are the prisons impacted by this? Do you know?
The
The prisons in Spain, are they allowing males into women's prison?
It is happening, just like it's happening also in sports, but there's no big cases like in the UK or in the States. But it is happening. But we are also like most of the feminists here are focused on what's happening with the uterus transplant thing. Do you know?
Okay. No.
Oh, I need to tell you this. You need to
Yeah.
listen to this story. I was walking nearby, like to a cafe, and I got this notification of a friend of mine, a rat femme, sending me this page with a newspaper, like a digital newspaper, like a radical feminist one, that said the first baby is born in Spain using a uterus transplant. And I was like, this
And
cannot be true.
so the uterus transplant would be in a female though, right?
And a female, like this cannot be true. And I didn't even trust the radical feminist newspaper. I went to another one, a generic one here, and it was true. So this was a woman who had a sister. This woman had a son, so she was already a mother. But her sister was not able to conceive, and she was infertile, and she had to like it was not possible for her. The only solution was surrogacy. But science is smarter. She got her uterus out and she got a transplant of her sister's uterus. She got pregnant, had a baby, and now she has the uterus also like out because having a transplanted organ is, this burden. You need to take a lot of medicines. The body rejects it, so it's very complicated to keep it there. So now the two sisters they don't have an uterus, but they both have a baby.
So there is part of that that's beautiful because it's sisterly love, but you have to consider the
Yeah.
implications of what that then could mean down the line. Now, I am curious, do you know at all if she had to take drugs while pregnant to avoid the
Yeah.
baby her body rejecting the uterus? So like how I wonder how those drugs would impact the baby too.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's not the concern is about the baby's health. It was a very hard pregnancy. The baby was premature, that she had to take drugs. It's not that like it's very dystopian because yes, it sounds like, oh,
Yeah.
sisterly love,
Yeah,
whatever,
like on the
but
surface it does sound beautiful and like they probably did it for a really loving reason, like but the implications and then you also are, you're science experimenting on a human life like a baby,
and isn't it creepy to
like it
have
could
like
result
a
in death
woman's
and
uterus there, like some
yeah,
other
yeah,
woman?
yeah.
No, it's
No, I
weird.
think
And
it is
also like,
creepy. Yeah. And the implications are really dangerous because it's, this isn't going to be something a science marketed to sisters only. It's,
no,
it's,
if there's women buying, renting another woman for 9 months, who tells us that some women are not going to request a different uterus now? Like some rich women who are infertile, they're going to get a uterus transplant
I
and
don't,
leave the other woman with the uterus.
they might, rich women, I think a large reason they do it is because they don't want stretch marks. They don't want to go through the pregnancy. They don't want to risk their own body. They want someone else to do it for them.
Like the
So I would see
actresses
like,
and the singers.
oh yeah. Like I think that they're doing it because they don't want to deal with the weight gain. They don't want to deal with the stretch marks. They don't want to sacrifice their own body. They want another woman to sacrifice her body. I think that is one that's part of the reason I really changed my mind is seeing all these rich women celebrities doing it. I was like, oh fuck you. Like you're doing this because you want another woman to have the stretch marks. You want another woman to deal with the weight gain. You want another woman to risk their life. You don't want to do it yourself.
That's true, like Nick Jonas' wife. But there's also like these cases of these women who are desperately wanting to be a mother. Like this
Yeah.
case, she wants this baby, this biological baby, the biological baby. It's my biggest wish, which is what people say about surrogacy, and that's why a lot of people see it as a beautiful thing to make, like to build a family. Like, oh, it's a beautiful way to build a family because you want a baby, you want a baby, you want a baby, but no one has the right to have a baby. Having a baby is
Yeah,
not a right.
exactly. No, it's not. And I will say this as a 36-year-old woman who would love to have a baby someday. I'm well aware that if that time should come that I want to have a baby and it's possible for like, I have a partner that I want to have a baby with, it's very likely that I wouldn't be able to. Like I'm at that age where it could go either way. And I'm saying that with full awareness of that. If that day should come, I'll accept it. And I already want to adopt a foster kid at some point anyway, but I still want to do that regardless of if I have biological children. But we have to be able to accept that some things we just can't all have everything we want. And that's life.
My generation
That's,
is my
as my
generation
grandma
is
would
so
say,
bad at
tough
it.
shit. I said, as my grandma would say, tough shit.
Yeah, like my
Like,
generation is growing up with this idea that you can get whatever you want if you have enough money.
yeah,
And if you don't, you can get the state to pay for it. And like it's so
that's
crazy.
what's so unsettling to me that they're doing this. Like with California, it's like the commodification of the female body just doesn't fucking end.
No, just deal with it. Sometimes you just can't have a baby. And I know that I say this as a young and fertile woman, but I may or may not have a baby. That's the reality of life. I may or
Yeah.
may not have one. Maybe I don't want to. Maybe I do. I want to foster. That's something that I want to do. I want to foster or adopt a child. I don't even know if I want to have a biological baby. I don't think so. I don't know. But what I do know is that I'm never going to put my wishes and my um desires in front or on top of another woman's or another child's
Yeah.
human rights, because having a baby is not a right. Just like having a partner, having love, in my opinion, is something you cannot buy. You can't buy love, you can't buy a baby. It's bigger than human life. Like it's the biggest thing you have, dignity, humanity, you know? How are you going to buy a
Yeah.
baby? And no matter how much a woman is suffering, I'm not blind anymore. I know. I may feel empathy for someone who wants to have a child and they can't, even for gay men, even for them, I feel empathy. Like, oh, I understand. But I'm not going to change my mind. Some
No.
people just cannot have babies, and it's
I don't know.
not a right.
Some gay men are taking male entitlement to a whole fucking new level that is just, I mean,
No,
the very,
I can't. I can't do it. I'm not that blindly empathetic. I think young women my age are such a target to feel empathy, even for people that don't
yeah,
deserve that empathy. But I'm not that young teenager anymore. I don't. I can't. I am rational too. I'm not all feeling. I used to think that I had to be like so much feeling because I am a female, and it's true. We do have
yeah,
feeling, and I don't want to lose that. But I am also a rational being, and I can rationalize the fact that even if you're suffering because you're infertile and can't have a child, having your sister's uterus inside of you and risking a baby and his or her well-being is not right. No, I'm not going to be empathetic. No, it's not right.
yeah. So I always like to end these kind of conversations because I've got to jet soon for my rehearsal. But I always like to end these conversations with what you would say to someone who might be afraid to speak out, especially because you're doing it very bravely. Because I mean, kudos to you being
Mm.
21 and speaking out is much more difficult because you're facing, most of my friends might not be public, but they agree with me in private. I've lost some friends, but what you're doing, it takes really a lot of courage to speak out and being at your age. So what would you say to someone who might be afraid to speak out that now is a good time to start speaking out?
I think that if you want to see a change in the world and how your generation thinks, you need to be that change. If you want to stop listening to those crazy things like gay men are infertile and they need women to fulfill their desire of having a baby, or that it's okay to have biological males in female sports, or that, you know, biological sex does not exist. If you want to stop listening to those things, you need to stop saying them yourself and you need to start talking your mind. And I'm scared. I don't even know if I'm going to face consequences because of my views. As a teacher, especially. I don't even
Yeah,
know. Like I'm still young and I can change my career, whatever, but I'm scared. I'm scared to have these views. But I do know that it's what makes sense to me. And I don't want to be a happy meal feminist. I want to stand by, like, I want to be brave and just like say my truth, what I believe. And I think that everything that I believe is based in my love for humanity, my own sex, like my own sex class, but also humanity as a whole. So
yeah.
yeah.
Well, beautiful. And is there anything else you felt like you wanted to say before we sign off? I want to make
Yes.
sure that you got everything you wanted to say out.
Yes. I think that Americans and English speaking people, like even people from the UK, they have it so easy to speak um with the word they and gender neutral language, and all of this makes a lot of sense. But people around the globe speak different languages that are not so simple, like to express those things. And everyone is following you. Like everyone else is following you, especially about this transgender thing. Everyone's taking America as a model. It's
Oh God,
very,
that's
very
terrible because America's
dangerous.
the worst. Well, besides Canada, I think Canada might be the worst. But anyway, go
It's
ahead.
very dangerous. You carry a
Yeah.
lot of responsibility because when we model great stuff, like we model after you, Americans and people from England, we do like see a lot of improvement in our cultures. But what's happening right now is the opposite. We are
Yeah.
we are, imitating you and following you in the worst and corrupted things, like
That's a really good point.
grooming children to be infertile and lack the ability of living a normal sexual life, sex life,
Yeah.
and just being healthy women and men. So just be careful.
Absolutely. Well, this was really fun. I'm really grateful that you were able to talk to me all the way from España. And good luck
I
on your
love
move to
Spain.
Belgium. Let me
I'm
know how that
nervous.
goes.
Yes,
You'll, I mean, I bet. Are you going to teach there?
I am, and I'm going to learn French.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yes. Well,
Awesome.
thank you for
Well, let's
having me.
talk soon. Yeah, of course. Thank you
Yes,
so
thank you for
much.
having me.